This is Robert Murdlacci, the MindShare Learning Report, Canada's Learning and Technology e-magazine. And welcome to This Week in Canadian EdTech special edition. We're here at FETC 2022, and I'm honored to join me for a MindShare Learning moment, Pat LaMorte, who is the Global Education Solutions Lead for Zoom Video Communications, a company that's been really accelerating and providing sustainability and for learning in the most challenging times. Congratulations on the impact you've made in the past couple of years, Pat, and welcome. I hope you and your family are healthy and well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm glad we ran into each other.
Now, Zoom traditionally hadn't been part of, is this the first FETC, or talk to me a little bit about Zoom in education?
Yeah, sure. So Zoom, as you know, started off as an enterprise platform. And as 2017-18, we launched into education, primarily higher ed at first.
Right.
And then K-12 followed. So I came onto Zoom in 2019. They stole me from industry. I was 27 years in public schools as a teacher, principal, and president. And what I saw was a company that really cared about education and a tool that could complement education without changing the way you teach.
Well, I'm impressed that they've brought in the pedagogical expertise, because oftentimes companies kind of miss that key component to really meet the needs of the market. So talk to me about what's new and exciting and what you've announced here at FETC.
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you. And I appreciate that compliment too, by the way, because it's very important. Because one of the reasons why we are thriving the way we do, or we're scaling with education, is we listen twice as much as we talk. Right? So I host industry councils with Ted Brodheim, our CIO advisor, and we solicit feedback constantly. So to your question, some of the things that you should be looking for, and if you don't see these, update your client, is tools to help security in classrooms and teacher engagement with students, especially in a dual modality. So things like our focus mode. Focus mode takes our traditional gallery that you all love, and when I hit that button, students can no longer see each other, just the teacher. So students, we solve for, I don't want them to see my background. They don't know where I live. I never gave them an invite in before. And testing and proctoring. Once that button's hit, this teacher still has view of the whole class. Students, only the teacher. They see boxes that say student. Another one is that trickiness of student engagement in a dual modality. So tools like Vanishing Pen and Arrow Tool, which are in our annotation, those are really cool. So Vanishing Pen scenario, student says, can you remind me where that link is? And I'll say, absolutely, watch carefully. And as I draw a circle around the link, it disappears. So it forces them to be engaged. Second scenario, I have a timeline up. Let's say activities in the Civil War. And I say, who can point to X, Y, and Z? Use your arrow tool. They all click at one time, the arrow has their name in it. So I can tell like that who answered and who pointed to the right feature. And I'll just complement that with an ending of Smart Gallery. So I can grab the squares on the screen and now create a seating chart that locks for all participants. So now as a teacher who I might have 8 students in the classroom, 10 at home, or vice versa, or we all know it's fluid, I now can say, we're going to start with Buzz on the left and go all the way over to the right, and I know they're in the same order. All right, that gets locked until I release that order. So to complement that, what might be interesting is that our hand raise tool has AI personality now, so that when I raise my hand, I go to the top of the list and the top of the screen, so the teacher knows who's been waiting the longest.
Fascinating. I love the notion of listening more than you're talking, because that really helps drive innovation and understanding meeting the needs of your market. What have you learned in the last couple of years with the pandemic and best practices around online learning? What do you see in the future in terms of what's going to stick? There's a lot of talk about the great snapback and online learning in a crisis mode is not necessarily the same as normal conditions.
Right, and I would say and add to that it's not sustainable. Right, we don't want to be in a reaction mode all the time. And so from a high level, what we've been hearing, what we've been talking about are 3 things, and this is global, it's not US, it's not Canada, is that education in whole, because we all had to do it overnight, has never been so accessible. Right, so now I'm hearing conversations like, how do we keep the kids enrolled in my district? Because now parents know that students don't have to be in that class for 8 hours a day. We know it works, right? And then also, the kids that came forward in that modality, how do I work with my governing bodies to meet them where they're at and not have them leave? And thirdly, there's this notion I keep hearing about, and it stems off of a statement I actually don't like. And the statement I heard over and over was that school's closed. School's never closed. The building's
right.
there. We have to be very clear about that. The building's closed. People still learn. So the notion is the perception of a learning deficit and what higher institutions are doing to protect frontline revenues for their requirements to come in. And then what impact corporate training is going to have on the 4-year degree. So with that being said, the future that we're talking about is twofold. I offer the question out all the time is, what does future competitiveness look like? And I hear VR, AR, AI. I hear the ability to have students in multiple locations working in cohorts around the world. We have some institutions that tell us their goal is to educate 1 million students by the end of the decade. That can't be possible in person, number one. The second one that I hear all the time is the fearful notion of, especially from colleges and higher institutions, is if I no longer have to have a student come to campus, how do I protect my branding and identity online? Like, you come to the campus, you put a logo on, you might see the buildings, and you get that feeling. So now it's caused us in one asset to build tools like on Zoom, where you can take your Zoom license for free, go to on Zoom and brand the whole page. So your alumni knows it's you, they're engaged, they feel welcomed, and using Zoom events to broad stream your events to your alumni. So even though they live in Utah and you're over in DC, they still are seeing the football games, the robotics competitions. They're involved in graduation. They feel closer and want to become benefactors and supporters of the school, even though it may have graduated 30 years ago.
Fascinating.
So I think if you're seeing the use of Zoom as a platform in the whole campus, parent-teacher conferences, IEP meetings, common spaces, automated attendance at the front desk, hit one button for guidance office, one button. So we're going to help efficiency of your whole campus with communications across the league. So I think Zoom stays as a critical tool and helps you grow into the school that you now are building.
And the community is a school. You're not restricted to the 4 walls any longer.
Yeah. I mean, let's take a simple idea that we all love if we have students, is that when my kids were small, the teacher invited parents in to talk about what they do as a job. Now, you see me. Sitting in a kindergarten chair isn't a pretty sight or a thing. But if mom or dad is a firefighter and they're at the firehouse with Zoom, and
bring
the students
them into
can
the
see
environment.
So I'm gonna challenge all educators around the world. Use a platform like Zoom to bring the world to your classroom.
I think you just came up with a new tagline.
I did. Bring the world to your classroom. We had a gentleman this morning talk about that, and they brought in, survivors from wars and Holocaust. They brought in astronauts, musicians. And my God, if I'm learning about history from a textbook, and I'm listening to the person who survived, brings a whole. I'm not going to remember maybe what I learned, but I remember with the experience, and I'll connect it back to it. So that's really important.
Well, it's about student engagement, and that
100%.
really addresses it head on.
And I want to use student as a broad term, right? We're lifelong learners. I mean,
K to grade, they say.
That's, I mean, we're lifelong learners. So how do we learn? We don't learn linear anymore. I know I might talk to you and be like, oh, watch a video, read a book, look at 2 podcasts. My teacher, YouTube, taught me how to fix my washing machine. I mean,
YouTube's a great resource for renovations that I've been doing.
That's right.
So with that, Pat LaMorte, I want to thank you for your time this afternoon.
I want to thank you for inviting me to do this. I'm honored, humbled.